The bleach stung my nostrils as I scrubbed the marble floors of the grand hall, my knees already aching from 2 hours of work. Around me, the entire pack buzzed with electric anticipation. Tonight was the ceremony of allegiance, when every pack in the Northern Territories would pledge loyalty to the Lycan King. I could hear the whispers echoing through the corridors, the rustle of expensive fabrics, the click of heels that cost more than my annual wages. I was invisible here. I had always been invisible. My blonde hair was pulled back in a tight practical bun, a few escaped strands clinging to my sweat-dampened neck. The gray cleaning uniform hung loose on my frame. Too big, like everything else in my life. I'd learned early that being small, being quiet, being unseen was the safest way to survive in a world where hierarchy meant everything, and I ranked somewhere below the dirt I was currently scrubbing. "Move faster, girl," Margot, the head housekeeper, snapped as she passed. "The king arrives within the hour, and if there's a single streak on these floors, it'll be your position." I nodded without looking up, pressing harder with the cloth. My hands were raw and red, but I didn't stop. I couldn't afford to stop. This job at the pack house was all I had. My mother was sick, bedridden with a wasting illness no doctor could name, and my younger brother needed books for his studies. We lived in the smallest cottage at the edge of pack territory, where the forest grew dark and wild, where people like us were forgotten. The scent of roses and cinnamon wafted through the hall as pack members began arriving for the pre-ceremony reception. I caught glimpses of them through my peripheral vision, elegant she-wolves in silk gowns that shimmered under the chandelier light, males in tailored suits that spoke of wealth and power. They laughed and spoke in confident tones, discussing politics and alliances, completely unaware of the girl on her knees making their world pristine. I had never shifted. That was my greatest shame, the secret that made me less than nothing in their eyes. At 23, I should have experienced my first transformation years ago, should have felt the moon's call, should have found my wolf. Instead, I remained trapped in this human form, weak and fragile. The pack doctor said it sometimes happened. Dormant wolves, late bloomers, but I'd stopped believing that years ago. The other cleaning staff whispered about me when they thought I couldn't hear. Dead weight, they called me. Human-born, though both my parents had been wolves. My father had disappeared when I was 10, gone on a hunting expedition that he never returned from. My mother said he'd been a good man, gentle and kind, and that I had his eyes, soft brown, nothing like the fierce gold or silver that marked true predators. My mother used to tell me stories when I was small, before the sickness took her strength. She'd stroke my hair and whisper about resilience, about how the quietest rivers carved the deepest canyons, about how survival itself was a form of courage. I didn't feel courageous now, scrubbing floors while the powerful prepared to bow before their king. The king. Ronan Blackthorn. Even his name carried weight, spoken in hushed reverence or trembling fear depending on who spoke it. I'd never seen him. People like me didn't attend ceremonies, didn't stand in receiving lines, didn't exist in the same spaces as royalty. But I'd heard the stories. 7 feet of lethal power, eyes like molten silver, a presence that could make grown alphas drop to their knees. He'd united the fractured Lycan territories through a combination of strategic brilliance and ruthless force, and now every pack owed him fealty. Some said he was cursed, that he'd lost his mate years ago, and the grief had turned him cold as winter stone. Others whispered he'd never had a mate at all, that he was too powerful, too dominant for the moon goddess to pair him with anyone. The rumors painted him as both savior and monster, king and executioner. I squeezed out my cloth in the bucket, the dirty water sloshing. My reflection wavered on the surface. Pale face, tired eyes, nothing remarkable. Just another forgotten wolf who couldn't even shift. "Everyone out!" Margot's voice cracked like a whip. "Final preparations. The king's convoy has been spotted on the mountain road." My heart lurched. I gathered my supplies quickly, my bucket clanging as I stood. The grand hall had transformed into something out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers blazed with light. White roses climbed marble columns. The pack's banners hung in perfect symmetry. It was beautiful in a way that made my chest ache with longing for a life I'd never have. Around me, the other servants scattered like mice, disappearing into the network of back corridors that honeyed through the pack house. I should have followed faster, but my legs were stiff from kneeling, my muscles protesting each movement. I limped toward the servants' entrance, trying to ignore the excited voices of arriving pack members. Did you hear? The king executed 3 alphas last month for breaking treaty. I heard he can shift faster than thought itself. My cousin said his beta once killed 20 rogues single-handedly. The conversations washed over me as I moved, invisible as always. I was nearly to the door when Margot grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. You! She hissed, her face twisted with irritation. You missed the west corridor. Go back and finish it. Now. But the king will not notice one worthless cleaning girl. Move. She shoved me toward the west wing, and I stumbled, catching myself against a pillar. My bucket sloshed, and I bit back a protest. Arguing with Margot meant losing my job, and I couldn't afford that. Not with my mother's medicine bills piling up. Not with my brother's school fees due next month. I turned back into the hall just as a commotion erupted at the main entrance. The massive oak doors swung open, and a wave of power rolled through the space like thunder before a storm. The air itself seemed to thicken, pressing against my skin, making my lungs work harder for each breath. He was early. I froze halfway across the hall, my bucket still in hand, trapped between the ornate pillars and the arriving dignitaries. I should have moved, should have fled to the shadows, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. The pressure in the room intensified, and then he entered. Ronan Blackthorn was larger than the story suggested, his presence filling the space in a way that defied physics. He wore black, simple and elegant, but power radiated from him in visible waves that made the chandeliers above him flicker. His dark hair was longer than I expected, brushing his shoulders, and his face was carved from harsh angles and unforgiving lines. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, stark white against tanned skin, but it was his eyes that stopped my breath. Silver, bright as moonlight on snow, and currently scanning the room with predatory focus. His entourage followed, 4 massive Lycans who moved with military precision, each of them radiating enough power to make my knees weak. A woman with silver-streaked hair who carried herself with the authority of an advisor walked at his right. Several pack alphas I recognized from official portraits flanked his left, including our own Alpha Donovan, who looked diminished next to the king's overwhelming presence. They were speaking to him, gesturing toward the ceremonial dais where the throne waited, but he wasn't listening. He had gone utterly still. Those silver eyes swept across the hall, past the assembled pack members who'd frozen in various stages of greeting, past the elaborate decorations, past the bowing servants, past everything until they locked, impossibly, inexplicably, on me. The bucket slipped from my numb fingers, hitting the marble with a crash that echoed through the sudden silence. Dirty water spread across the floor I'd just cleaned, creating a dark pool that reflected the chandelier light, but I couldn't look away from him. The air between us seemed to shimmer, to pulse with something ancient and undeniable. He inhaled sharply, his chest expanding, his entire body going rigid. I watched his pupils dilate until his eyes were more black than silver, watched his hands curl into fists at his sides so tight his knuckles went white. A low sound rumbled from his chest, not quite a growl, not quite a word, but something primal that made every wolf in the room turn and stare. "Impossible," someone whispered, the word carrying in the shocked silence. Ronan Blackthorn took a step toward me, then another, moving with the inevitability of an avalanche. The crowd parted without conscious thought, pack members pressing themselves against walls and columns to clear his path. His gaze never left mine, and I felt pinned, dissected, seen in a way I'd never been seen before. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. He stopped 3 feet away, towering over me, and breathed in deeply through his nose. His expression shifted through several emotions too quickly to name: shock, disbelief, hunger, and something that looked almost like pain. "You," he said, his voice a dark rumble that vibrated through my bones and settled somewhere deep in my chest. "What is your name?" My mouth opened, but no sound came out. My entire body trembled, caught between the urge to run and the strange magnetic pull that made me want to move closer to him, to close the distance between us. "Answer your king," the silver-haired woman said sharply, though her eyes were wide with what looked like wonder, or perhaps fear. "Emma," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Emma Sterling." "Emma," he repeated, tasting my name like a prayer or a curse, rolling it on his tongue as if committing it to memory. He moved closer, and I caught his scent, pine and smoke, winter wind and something wild that had no name, something that called to a part of me I didn't know existed. "Do you know what you are to me?" I shook my head, mute with confusion and fear and something else I couldn't name. His hand rose slowly, giving me time to flinch away, but I stood frozen as his fingers brushed my cheek with unexpected gentleness. The contact sent electricity racing across my skin, and I gasped. Heat bloomed where he touched me, spreading like wildfire through my veins. "Mine," he whispered, the word carrying the weight of absolute certainty, of divine right, of fate itself. "You are mine." The room exploded in whispers, shocked murmurs rising like a tide. But I heard none of it. Because impossible as it seemed, terrifying as it was, I felt something stirring deep inside me. Something that had been sleeping my entire life, now waking with a howl that echoed only in my soul. My wolf. After 23 years of silence, she was finally answering a call I hadn't known I was waiting for. The world tilted sideways, and I would have fallen if Ronan hadn't caught me. His hands closed around my arms, steadying me, and the touch sent another wave of heat through my system. My wolf, I had a wolf, was clawing at the inside of my chest, desperate and wild, trying to reach him. "She's shifting," the silver-haired woman said urgently, stepping closer. "Your Majesty, she needs—" "I know what she needs," Ronan cut her off, his voice rough. His eyes never left my face, searching for something I didn't understand. "Emma, breathe. Look at me and breathe." I tried to obey, dragging air into my lungs, but my skin felt too tight, my bones aching with a pressure I'd never experienced. Colors seemed brighter, sounds sharper. I could hear heartbeats, dozens of them, thundering around us like drums. I could smell fear and excitement and something else, something sweet and dark that I realized was coming from Ronan himself. "What's happening to me?" I gasped. "Your wolf is waking," he said softly, though his jaw was clenched tight. "She's been dormant, waiting for this, for me." The arrogance of the statement should have angered me, but I felt the truth of it resonating in my bones. My wolf had been waiting, all these years of silence, of shame, of believing I was broken. She'd simply been sleeping until her mate called. Mate. The word crashed through my mind like lightning, illuminating everything. The stories I'd heard, the legends every wolf child grew up with, the mate bond, the sacred connection that tied two souls together. I'd stopped believing I'd ever have one. Girls like me, wolfless and worthless, didn't get fairy tale endings. "This can't be real," I whispered. "It is real," Ronan said, and there was something almost vulnerable in his expression, a crack in the stone-cold mask. "I've lived 200 years believing I had no mate, that the moon goddess had passed me by. And here you are. Here you've been, cleaning floors in a pack that doesn't even see you. 200 years. The number made me dizzy. He looked maybe 30, but Lycans aged slowly, their lifespans stretching far beyond normal wolves. He'd lived entire lifetimes before I was even born. "Your Majesty," Alpha Donovan's voice cut through the moment, oily with false concern. "Perhaps we should move this to a private setting. The girl is clearly overwhelmed, and the ceremony can wait," Ronan said without looking at him, his tone brooking no argument. "Clear the hall. Everyone out. Now." There was a moment of stunned silence, then frantic movement. Pack members scrambled toward the exits, their whispers growing louder as they went. I caught fragments of conversation. "A cleaning girl. Never even shifted. Can't possibly be—" Alpha Donovan didn't move immediately, his face reddening with barely suppressed rage. I knew that look. I'd seen it before, directed at servants who'd displeased him, at pack members who'd questioned his authority. He was a proud man, vain and cruel, and having his ceremony disrupted by someone like me had to be humiliating. "Alpha Donovan," Ronan said quietly, finally turning to look at him. "Is there a reason you're still in my presence?" The power in those words made me flinch. It wasn't a question. It was a warning wrapped in silk. Donovan's face went pale, and he bowed hastily before retreating. Within minutes, the hall was empty except for Ronan, the silver-haired woman, and the 4 massive Lycans who'd entered with him. They positioned themselves at the exits, standing guard, their expressions unreadable. "Celine," Ronan said to the woman, "have rooms prepared. Emma will be staying in the royal wing." "The royal wing?" I found my voice, panic cutting through the haze. "No, I can't. I have to go home. My mother is sick, and my brother—" "Will be cared for," Ronan interrupted gently. "Celine, send healers to the Sterling residence immediately. And the boy, what's his name, Emma?" "Daniel," I whispered, my throat tight. "Daniel will be enrolled in the Royal Academy. They'll both be protected, provided for. You have my word." I stared at him, unable to process the sudden shift in my reality. Hours ago, I'd been scrubbing floors, invisible and forgotten. Now a king was promising to care for my family, claiming me as his mate, upending everything I thought I knew about my life. Why? The question came out broken. Why me? I'm nobody. I'm wolfless. Or I was. I'm just a cleaning girl. Ronan's expression softened, and he reached out to cup my face with both hands, forcing me to meet his eyes. "You are not just anything. You are my mate, the other half of my soul, and you were never wolfless. Your wolf was simply waiting for the right moment to wake, for me to wake her." The silver-haired woman, Celine, cleared her throat delicately. "Your Majesty, if I may suggest, perhaps Miss Sterling would benefit from some rest and privacy. The mate bond is overwhelming under the best circumstances, and hers is awakening after years of dormancy. The shift could happen at any moment." Ronan nodded slowly, though he looked reluctant to release me. "You're right. Emma, will you come with me? I have a suite prepared where you can rest. Celine will stay with you if you prefer not to be alone." Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, to run back to my little cottage at the edge of Packlands and pretend this was all a dream. But my wolf was wide awake now, pacing inside my mind, and she wanted nothing more than to stay close to him. The pull between us was magnetic, undeniable. "Okay," I heard myself say. Ronan's shoulders relaxed fractionally, and he offered me his arm like I was someone important, someone worth protecting. I placed my hand tentatively on his sleeve, feeling the solid muscle beneath the fabric, and let him guide me from the grand hall. The walk through the pack house felt surreal. Servants pressed themselves against walls as we passed, their eyes wide with shock and speculation. I saw Margot's face in the crowd, slack-jawed and pale. She'd never look at me the same way again. None of them would. The royal wing was on the top floor, far from the servants' quarters I'd cleaned 1,000 times but never entered. Ronan led me to a suite of rooms that were larger than my entire cottage. High ceilings with exposed beams, walls painted in soft creams and golds, furniture that looked both ancient and priceless. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the forest, the moon rising fat and silver above the trees. "This is too much," I said faintly. "This is nothing," Ronan countered. "You're going to be queen, Emma. You'll have palaces, territories, power beyond imagination. This is just the beginning." Queen. The word was so absurd I almost laughed. Me, Emma Sterling, the girl who couldn't shift, who scrubbed floors for pennies, who'd spent her whole life invisible, queen of all Lycans. "I can't do this," I said, the panic finally breaking through. "I don't know how to be anything you need. I can barely take care of my own family." "How am I supposed to breathe?" Ronan said again, pulling me close. This time I didn't resist, letting him wrap his arms around me. His scent surrounded me, calming my racing heart. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight. Right now you just need to rest. Let your wolf settle. Everything else can wait." But even as he said it, I heard shouting from somewhere below us. Angry voices rising in volume. Celine moved to the window, her expression darkening. "Your Majesty, we have a situation." Ronan tensed against me, then gently set me aside. He crossed to the window in 3 long strides, and I watched his jaw clench as he looked down at whatever was happening in the courtyard. "What is it?" I asked, moving to stand beside him. Below, a crowd had gathered. I recognized members of my pack, including Alpha Donovan at the front, his face twisted with rage. Behind him stood several high-ranking wolves, all of them looking furious. They were shouting up at the windows, though I couldn't make out the words. "They're protesting," Celine said grimly. "They're calling the mate bond into question, saying a wolfless servant can't possibly be the king's true mate." "She wasn't wolfless," Ronan growled, his eyes flashing silver. "Her wolf was dormant. There's a difference." "They won't see it that way," Celine replied. "They see a low-ranking pack member with no status, no power, no apparent wolf until you arrived. They'll say you're mistaken, that the bond is false, that—" "Enough," Ronan's voice cut like a blade. "I know what they'll say. I've ruled these territories for a century and a half. I know how to handle dissent." But I saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands had curled into fists again. This wasn't just about me. This was about his authority, his power. If his own subjects could question his mate bond, they could question anything, every decision, every command, every law. And it was all because of me. "Maybe they're right," I said quietly. "Maybe this is a mistake. Maybe you should—" Ronan spun to face me, and the intensity in his eyes stole my breath. "Don't," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Don't let them make you doubt what we both know is true. I have waited 200 years for you, Emma Sterling. I'm not letting anyone, not Donovan, not the other alphas, not the entire fucking kingdom, take you from me." The possessiveness in his tone should have frightened me. Instead, my wolf preened, pleased by his vehemence, by his claim. She wanted this, wanted him, with a certainty that terrified my human mind. "What do we do?" I asked. Ronan's expression shifted, becoming calculating. "We show them they're wrong. Tomorrow at the ceremony, you'll stand beside me. You'll let your wolf show herself, and they'll see exactly what you are. My mate, my queen, and stronger than any of them imagine. But I've never shifted," I protested. "What if I can't? What if my wolf goes back to sleep and—" "She won't." Ronan crossed the distance between us, taking my hands in his. "Your wolf is awake now, Emma. She's been waiting for this moment your entire life. Trust her. Trust yourself." Below, the shouting grew louder. I heard my name, Emma Sterling, spat like a curse. Heard someone call me a fraud, a pretender. Heard Alpha Donovan's voice rising above the rest, demanding an audience with the king, demanding answers. "They hate me," I whispered, "and they don't even know me. They fear what they don't understand," Ronan said, "but they'll learn. One way or another, they'll learn that you are exactly where you're meant to be." He pulled me closer, and despite the chaos below, despite my terror and confusion, I felt safe. His heartbeat was steady against my ear, his arms solid around me. My wolf had gone quiet, content in his presence, and for just a moment, I let myself believe that maybe, impossibly, improbably, this could work. Then the window shattered. Glass exploded inward in a glittering shower, and Ronan moved faster than my eyes could track. One moment I was standing by the window. The next I was pressed against the far wall, Ronan's body shielding mine completely. His 4 guards burst into the room, weapons drawn, their eyes glowing with their wolves' presence. A rock the size of my fist lay among the glass shards, and wrapped around it was a piece of paper. The shouting from below had turned to chaos. Some voices raised in approval, others in shock. "Secure the perimeter," Ronan commanded, his voice deadly calm. "Find out who threw that and bring them to me. Alive." 2 of the guards disappeared immediately. Celine bent to retrieve the rock, carefully unwrapping the paper. Her face paled as she read it. "Your Majesty, perhaps you shouldn't—" "Give it to me." She handed it over reluctantly. I watched Ronan's expression darken as he scanned the words, his jaw clenching so tight I heard his teeth grind. When he crumpled the paper in his fist, I saw his claws had extended. Black, curved, lethal. "What does it say?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. "Nothing worth repeating," Ronan said tightly. "Please. I need to know what we're dealing with." He looked at me for a long moment, then slowly opened his hand. The paper was wrinkled but readable. I took it with shaking fingers and read the crude letters scrawled in dark ink. "A wolfless whore doesn't deserve a crown. Reject her before she poisons the bloodline. The pack demands a true queen. The words hit like physical blows. I'd been called worthless before, treated like dirt, but seeing it written out, this formal condemnation from people who didn't know me, who judged me based on nothing but my rank, made something inside me crack open. "Emma," Ronan said softly, reaching for me. I stepped back, still staring at the paper. They think I'm going to ruin everything. Your rule, your bloodline, your kingdom, they're fools who don't understand what they're talking about. Are they? I looked up at him, and I felt tears burning behind my eyes, though I refused to let them fall. I can't even shift properly. What if they're right? What if I'm not strong enough for this? What if I... Enough. Ronan's voice cracked through the room like thunder. I will not hear you diminish yourself. Not for them, not for anyone. He crossed to me in 2 strides, gripping my shoulders. Listen to me, Emma. Those people down there, they're afraid. Afraid of change. Afraid of losing power. Afraid of anything that doesn't fit their narrow understanding of how the world should work. But you are not responsible for their fear. They want you to reject me. I know what they want. I don't care. His silver eyes blazed. I've ruled these territories by being stronger, smarter, and more ruthless than anyone who's ever challenged me. I've made decisions that cost lives, that shaped the future of our kind. And not once, have I doubted my judgment. Until tonight, when I found you and every certainty I've ever had shifted into place like it was always meant to be this way. His words wrapped around me like armor, but the fear didn't completely recede. What if I fail you? What if you don't? He cupped my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. What if you're exactly what this kingdom needs? Someone who knows what it's like to be overlooked, underestimated, cast aside. Someone with compassion and strength that doesn't come from claws and fangs. You've survived in a world that gave you nothing, Emma. That takes more courage than most of those wolves down there will ever possess. Before I could respond, one of the guards returned, dragging a young man who couldn't have been more than 20. His face was bloody, his shirt torn, and he reeked of fear and cheap alcohol. Found him trying to flee into the forest, Your Majesty, the guard reported. He confessed immediately. Ronan released me and turned to face the prisoner. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Who ordered you to throw that rock? No one, the young man stammered. It was my idea, I swear. Everyone was saying she's not good enough, that she's... Choose your next words very carefully, Ronan warned, his voice soft and infinitely dangerous. The young man's eyes went wide, darting between Ronan and me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was drunk and stupid and, please. I have a family. You didn't mean to insult my mate, to threaten her with violence? Ronan took a step closer, and the young man whimpered. To question my judgment as your king? Ronan, I said quietly, surprised by my own voice. He's terrified. He's just a kid who made a mistake. Ronan didn't look at me. He could have killed you with that rock. If I hadn't moved fast enough. But you did. And I'm fine. I moved to stand beside him, placing my hand on his arm. I felt the rigid tension there, the barely controlled fury. Please, don't do this. He needs to understand there are consequences. Then let the consequence be mercy, I said. Let him see that his future queen isn't the monster they think she is. The room went silent. Even the young man stopped whimpering, staring at me with something like hope flickering in his eyes. Ronan turned to look at me, and I saw the war happening behind his expression. The king who'd ruled through strength and fear warring with the man who'd just found his mate, and wanted nothing more than to protect her. You're asking me to show weakness, he said. I'm asking you to show them who we are, I countered. Not what they expect, but what we could be. Together. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the armor. He looked at the young man, then back at me, then nodded slowly. What's your name? T. Thomas, Your Majesty. Thomas Webb. Thomas Webb, you are hereby banished from this pack for 1 month. You'll spend that time working in the border settlements, helping rebuild villages that were damaged in the recent rogue attacks. When you return, you'll report directly to me and tell me what you've learned about service and sacrifice. Do you understand? Thomas nodded frantically. Yes, Your Majesty. Thank you, Your Majesty. Get him out of my sight, Ronan told the guard, who hauled Thomas to his feet and dragged him from the room. When we were alone again, just Ronan, Celine, and the remaining guards, Ronan turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You made me look soft. I made you look human, I corrected. Or as human as a 200-year-old Lycan king can look. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. So brief I almost missed it. You're going to be trouble, aren't you? Probably, I admitted. Celine cleared her throat. Your Majesty, we should address the crowd. They're still gathered below and tensions are rising. Alpha Donovan is calling for a formal challenge to the mate bond. A challenge? I asked. What does that mean? It means, Ronan said grimly, that he wants to invoke the ancient laws. A trial to prove the validity of a mate bond when it's called into question. How do you prove something like that? Ronan exchanged a look with Celine that made my stomach drop. Through a series of tests, trials of strength, loyalty, and the bond itself. It's archaic and rarely used, but it's still law. If enough alphas support Donovan's challenge, I'm legally bound to allow it. And if I fail these trials... You won't fail, Ronan said firmly. But if I do... He didn't answer immediately, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. If I failed, the bond would be declared false. I would be removed from the palace, from Ronan's side. And he would be expected to continue searching for his true mate. This is ridiculous, I said. Why can't they just accept a howl cut through the night, long and mournful, and it was joined by others? Within seconds, dozens of voices had picked up the cry, filling the air with a sound that was both beautiful and terrifying. It was a challenge, a call to assembly, an ancient summons that no wolf could ignore. They're invoking the Council of Alphas, Celine said urgently. Your Majesty, you have to respond. If you don't, they'll consider it an admission of doubt. Ronan's eyes had gone completely silver, his wolf rising to the surface. Then we respond. Emma, stay here with Celine. I'll handle... No. The word came out stronger than I expected. If they're calling me into question, I should be there. I won't hide. Emma, these trials, they're not just formalities. They're dangerous. They're designed to break bonds that aren't genuine, to expose weakness. I won't risk you. You don't have a choice, I said, meeting his eyes. I'm your mate, remember? That means we face this together. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw frustration and pride and fear warring in his expression. Finally, he nodded. Together. But you stay close to me, and you follow my lead. Understood? Understood. He turned to Celine. Gather my council. Send word to the alphas that I'm accepting the challenge. We'll convene in the ceremonial grounds at midnight. That's less than an hour, Your Majesty. Then we'd better hurry. As Celine rushed from the room to carry out his orders, Ronan turned back to me. He pulled me close, pressing his forehead to mine in a gesture that felt both intimate and desperate. Whatever happens down there, he said quietly, whatever they say or do, remember that you are mine. The moon goddess herself bound us together. No trial, no challenge, no amount of doubt from small-minded fools can change that. I'm scared, I admitted. I know. So am I. The admission surprised me. You're the Lycan King. You're not afraid of anything. I'm afraid of losing you before I've even had the chance to know you, he said. I'm afraid that they'll hurt you, that I won't be able to protect you, that their fear and prejudice will... He stopped, jaw clenched. I'm afraid, Emma. For the first time in a very long time. I'm truly afraid. I reached up to touch his face, feeling the rough stubble along his jaw. Then we'll be afraid together, and we'll face whatever comes, together. He kissed me then, hard and desperate, and I felt my wolf surge forward to meet his. The connection between us blazed like fire, confirming what we both already knew. This was real. The bond was real, and no amount of trials or challenges could break what the moon goddess had forged. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing silver. Get dressed. Wear something that shows you're not afraid of them. Celine will help you. Where are you going? To remind the alphas why they bow to me, he said darkly. and to make it very clear what will happen to anyone who tries to harm what's mine. He left in a swirl of black fabric, and I was alone with the remaining guards and the shattered window. The night air poured in, carrying the scent of pine and earth and the howls of wolves gathering for a trial that could determine the rest of my life. I moved to the window, looking down at the courtyard below. More wolves had arrived, their eyes glowing in the darkness. I saw Alpha Donovan at the center, surrounded by other pack leaders, all of them looking up at the palace with expressions of anger and determination. They wanted me gone. They wanted Ronan to reject me, to admit mistake, to find someone worthier. And maybe, a small voice whispered in the back of my mind, they were right. Maybe I was a mistake. Maybe the moon goddess had gotten it wrong, paired the wrong souls together. But then I felt her, my wolf, fully awake now, pacing inside my mind with absolute certainty. She wasn't afraid. She knew, with an instinct older than thought itself, that we belonged here, that Ronan was ours, just as we were his. We are not weak, she seemed to say. We are exactly what he needs. I just hoped she was right. Celine returned with an armful of clothing and a determined expression. We have 30 minutes, she said, laying out garments on the bed. The council doesn't wait, not even for kings. She'd brought a dress, midnight blue silk that shimmered like water under moonlight, simple in design but clearly expensive. There were boots, too, soft leather that laced up the calf, practical yet elegant. As I changed, my hands trembling slightly, Celine worked on my hair, pulling it free from its bun and braiding it in a complex pattern I didn't recognize. This style, she said as she worked, was worn by the first Lycan queen, 3 centuries ago. She was common-born too, chosen by a king who saw strength where others saw only poverty. The old wolves will recognize it. Some will be offended. Others will remember that bloodline doesn't always determine worth. You think I can do this? I asked quietly. Celine's hands paused, then continued their weaving. I think the moon goddess doesn't make mistakes, no matter what the alphas believe. I've served Ronan for 70 years, Emma. I've seen him face armies, negotiate treaties, execute traitors without flinching. But I've never seen him afraid until tonight. That tells me everything I need to know about how real this bond is. When she finished, I barely recognized my reflection. The dress hugged my frame, making me look stronger somehow, more substantial. The braided hair gave me an almost regal appearance, though my face was still too pale, my eyes too wide with barely concealed terror. You look like a queen, Celine said softly. Now you just have to believe it. 2 guards escorted us through the palace corridors. We passed servants who stopped to stare, pack members who whispered behind their hands. I kept my chin up, remembering my mother's words about rivers and canyons, about quiet strength. I might not have claws or fangs yet, but I had survived 23 years in a world that told me I was worthless. That had to count for something. The ceremonial grounds were at the heart of pack territory, a massive clearing surrounded by ancient oak trees. Torches burned in a wide circle, casting dancing shadows across the assembled wolves. There had to be 100 of them, alphas from across the northern territories, their betas and advisors, high-ranking pack members who'd traveled to witness the ceremony of allegiance and were now getting a very different show. Ronan stood at the center, still dressed in black, his presence dominating the space despite being outnumbered. His 4 guards flanked him, their expressions carved from stone. When he saw me approaching, something flickered across his face. Relief and pride and fierce protectiveness all at once. I walked to his side, acutely aware of every eye tracking my movement. The whispers grew louder, and I caught fragments. She does look different. Cleaned my floors last week. Can't be real. Alpha Donovan stepped forward from the crowd, his face flushed with righteous anger. He was a large man, thick through the shoulders, with graying hair and cold blue eyes that had always looked through me rather than at me. Now those eyes burned with contempt. Your Majesty, he said, his voice carrying across the clearing. We invoke the trials of proof. The mate bond you claim with this female is called into question by no fewer than 15 alphas of standing. Under ancient law, you are required to submit to testing or forfeit your claim. I'm aware of the law, Donovan, Ronan said, his voice casual but edged with danger. I'm also aware that you're using it to challenge my authority. Let's not pretend this is about concern for my well-being. Donovan's jaw clenched. This is about the integrity of the bloodline, the strength of our leadership. Every wolf here knows that mates are chosen for compatibility, for complementary power. This girl has no power. She couldn't even shift until you arrived. How can she possibly be your equal? She doesn't need to be my equal, Ronan replied. She needs to be my complement, and that's exactly what she is. Prove it, another alpha called from the crowd, a woman with silver hair and scars crossing her face. Show us the bond marks. Show us her wolf. Give us something more than your word. Ronan's hand found mine, his fingers threading through my own. His touch sent warmth racing up my arm, and I felt my wolf stir in response. The bond marks will appear in time, as they always do. As for her wolf, Emma, are you ready? I looked up at him, my heart hammering. I've never shifted before. What if I can't? You can, he said with absolute certainty. Your wolf is awake now. She's been waiting for this moment. Trust her. Trust yourself. He released my hand and stepped back, giving me space. The crowd pressed closer, forming a tighter circle, their eyes glowing in the torchlight. I could smell their skepticism, their hunger to see me fail. I closed my eyes and reached inward, searching for the presence I'd felt stirring since Ronan had touched me. My wolf was there, pacing and eager, no longer sleeping, but fully alert. I'd spent so many years believing she didn't exist that actually connecting with her felt surreal. Are you ready? I asked her silently. Her response was immediate, a surge of confidence and fierce joy. I've been ready for 23 years. Let me show them who we are. The shift began as a ripple beneath my skin, then a wave, then a tsunami. Pain lanced through me, bones breaking and reforming, muscles tearing and rebuilding, skin stretching and reshaping. I heard myself cry out, falling to my hands and knees as my body transformed. The dress Celine had so carefully chosen tore apart, falling away in shreds. But unlike the stories I'd heard of first shifts taking hours, of wolves screaming in agony as their bodies adjusted to the change, mine was fast, impossibly fast. Within seconds, I stood on 4 legs, fur the color of moonlight covering my body, my senses exploding with information. I could hear heartbeats, every single one in the clearing. I could smell fear and surprise, and, from Ronan, overwhelming pride and possessiveness. The world looked different, sharper somehow. Colors muted, but movement crystal clear. I was smaller than the wolves around me, more delicate in build, but I felt powerful in a way I never had as a human. My wolf stretched, testing her new freedom, and then she lifted her head and howled. The sound that came from my throat was pure and strong, carrying across the clearing and into the forest beyond. It wasn't a challenge or a threat, it was a declaration. I am here. I am real. I exist. Ronan shifted beside me, his transformation even faster than mine, and suddenly a massive black wolf stood where the king had been. He was enormous, easily twice my size, his fur dark as midnight except for a white patch on his chest. His silver eyes found mine, and even in wolf form, I felt the connection between us intensify. He moved closer, pressing his muzzle against my neck, scent marking me in a gesture every wolf understood. Claiming me, accepting me, protecting me. The crowd erupted in whispers, some wolves backing away, others pressing forward for a better look. I heard Alpha Donovan's voice, strained with disbelief. It's impossible. She had no wolf yesterday. How can she shift now? Because she's his mate, you fool, someone else said, the scarred female alpha from before. The bond awakened her dormant wolf. It's rare, but it happens. It's proof, not doubt. Proof of what? Donovan snarled. That he's so powerful he can force a shift? That doesn't make her worthy. Ronan's growl cut him off, a sound so deep and threatening that several wolves dropped to their bellies in instinctive submission. He shifted back to human form with fluid ease, standing naked and unashamed before the assembly, his body covered in scars that told stories of battles won. Enough, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. You want proof? You have it. Emma's wolf has awakened. The bond is real. Now, are we done with this circus? Or do I need to remind you what happens to wolves who question their king? The trials require 3 tests, Donovan insisted, though his voice had lost some of its conviction. The shift was only the first. We need to see bond resonance and a test of loyalty, the scarred alpha finished. Fine. Let's finish this quickly. I have better things to do than watch you embarrass yourself, Donovan. Celine appeared at my side, draping a soft blanket over my human form as I shifted back. The transformation back was easier, more natural, and within moments I stood on 2 legs again, wrapped in fabric that preserved my modesty, if not my dignity. Bond resonance, Ronan said flatly. You want to see if our souls recognize each other. Very well. He took my hand and led me to the center of the circle. A white-haired elder stepped forward, carrying a ceremonial bowl filled with some kind of silver liquid that caught the torchlight. The ancient test, the elder intoned. Both must drink, and if the bond is true, the connection will manifest visibly for all to witness. Ronan took the bowl first, drinking deeply without hesitation. Then he passed it to me, and I saw his jaw clench, the only sign of his concern. If this didn't work, if the bond didn't show itself. I raised the bowl to my lips. The liquid tasted like moonlight and metal, cold and electric on my tongue. I drank it all, feeling it burn down my throat and settle in my chest like a living coal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the bond mark began to appear. It started as a tingling sensation on my left shoulder, then warmth, then a burning that made me gasp. I looked down and watched as silver lines traced themselves across my skin, forming an intricate pattern. A crown intertwined with a crescent moon, surrounded by thorns and stars. It glowed, pulsing with each beat of my heart. Ronan pulled aside his shirt, revealing his own shoulder. An identical mark blazed there, the same silver light emanating from it. As we stood together, the marks brightened, sending threads of light between us, visible proof of the connection that bound our souls. The clearing fell silent. The moon goddess has spoken, the elder said quietly. The bond is genuine. Any who doubt it now doubt her divine will. I heard wolves dropping to their knees, some in respect, others in shock. Even Alpha Donovan looked shaken, his face pale in the torchlight. The scarred Alpha smiled grimly, nodding to herself, but Donovan wasn't finished. There's still the loyalty test, he said desperately. The final trial. She must prove she'll choose him over everything, over her own pack, her own blood. That's the law. Ronan's expression darkened. You're pushing your luck, Donovan. It's still law, Donovan insisted. Unless you're afraid she'll fail? Before Ronan could respond, a commotion erupted at the edge of the clearing. Guards dragged 2 figures forward. My mother, wrapped in blankets and barely able to stand, and my brother Daniel, his face bruised and terrified. No, I breathed, horror flooding through me. Donovan smiled, cruel and triumphant. The loyalty test is simple, girl. Choose. Stay with your king and watch your family be exiled from pack lands, stripped of protection, left to fend for themselves in the wilderness. Or renounce the bond, return to your place, and they'll be cared for as they've always been. You bastard, Ronan snarled, moving toward Donovan, but the scarred Alpha stepped between them. It's within the bounds of the trial, she said reluctantly. Ancient law allows it. The choice must be hers, Your Majesty. You cannot interfere. I stared at my mother's frail form, at Daniel's frightened eyes. They were all I had left in the world. The only family I'd ever known. My mother had sacrificed everything to raise us, had worked herself sick to keep us fed. Daniel still had his whole life ahead of him, and he deserved better than to be cast out because of me. But I felt Ronan's presence behind me, felt the bond pulsing between us, felt my wolf howling in protest at the very idea of leaving him. Emma, my mother said weakly, her voice carrying across the clearing. Don't you dare choose us. You choose him. You choose your future. Daniel and I will be fine. We've survived worse than exile. Mom, no. Listen to me. Her voice grew stronger, more fierce. I raised you to be brave, to take the chances that come your way. This is your chance, your mate, your destiny. Don't throw it away for us. Daniel nodded, tears streaming down his face. She's right. Go, Emma. Be queen. We'll manage. I looked between them and Ronan, my heart tearing in two. This was impossible. How could I choose? How could anyone expect me to? Then I understood. This wasn't really a test of loyalty to Ronan. It was a test of faith. In him, in the bond, in the future we could build together. I turned to face Donovan, and when I spoke, my voice was steady. I choose my mate. I choose Ronan. I choose to be his queen. Donovan's smile widened. Then your family will be under the protection of the Lycan king. I continued, cutting him off, because that's what being queen means. It means having the power to protect the people I love. It means changing the laws that say families can be used as weapons against each other. It means standing beside the one person in this entire kingdom who has the authority to make things better. I stepped closer to Donovan, and I was pleased to see him take a small step back. You wanted me to fail. You wanted me to prove I was too weak, too conflicted, too human to be his mate. But you just proved the opposite. I chose strength over fear. I chose faith over doubt, and I will spend every day of my reign making sure no other wolf is ever put in this position again. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Ronan was there, pulling me against him, his arms wrapped around me like bands of steel. The trials are complete, the elder announced. The mate bond stands verified and true. Any who challenge it further, challenge the moon goddess herself. Wolves began to shift, to bow, to acknowledge what they'd just witnessed. Even Donovan backed away, his face twisted with barely suppressed rage but unable to argue further. My mother and Daniel were released, guards helping them to a comfortable position at the clearing's edge. My mother caught my eye and smiled, weak but genuine, and I knew she was proud. Ronan tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his blazing silver eyes. You were magnificent, he said quietly, for my ears alone. Fierce and brave and everything a queen should be. I was terrified, I admitted. I know. That's what made it brave. The days following the trials blurred together in a whirlwind of transformation. Ronan had my mother moved to the palace infirmary, where royal healers worked around the clock to treat her illness. Within a week, she was sitting up, color returning to her hollow cheeks, laughing as she told stories about my childhood to anyone who would listen. Daniel was enrolled in the Royal Academy as promised, and I'd never seen him so excited, surrounded by books and teachers who actually recognized his brilliant mind. But the real changes were happening inside me. My wolf had fully integrated with my consciousness, no longer a separate presence, but part of who I'd always been. Shifting became as natural as breathing. I could do it in seconds now, flowing between forms with an ease that surprised even the experienced wolves around me. Celine said it was the mate bond, that being connected to someone as powerful as Ronan amplified my own abilities. But I thought it was simpler than that. I'd finally become who I was always meant to be. The palace staff treated me differently now. No more sneers or dismissive glances. They bowed when I passed, called me Your Highness, with genuine respect, asked if I needed anything. It was disorienting and humbling in equal measure. Margot had been reassigned to the kitchens. Not as punishment, Ronan assured me, but because I couldn't have someone in a position of authority who'd treated me so poorly. I'd argued for leniency, but he'd been immovable on that point. A queen protects those beneath her, he'd said. But she also sets standards. Margot will learn that cruelty has consequences. The bond marks on our shoulders had settled into permanent silver patterns, visible when we willed them to be, hidden when we chose privacy. I'd catch Ronan staring at mine sometimes, his expression softening in a way that made my heart ache. For all his power and ruthlessness, he looked at me like I was something precious, something he'd waited lifetimes to find. 3 weeks after the trials, Ronan called me to the strategy room. I found him bent over a massive table covered in maps, surrounded by his council, Celine, his 4 guards whose names I'd learned were Felix, Garrett, Nathaniel, and Dominic, and the scarred female alpha who'd spoken in my defense. Her name was Vera, and she ruled the Eastern Territories with an iron fist and a surprisingly dry sense of humor. Emma, Ronan said, gesturing me closer. We need to discuss the coronation. My stomach flipped. We'd been avoiding this conversation, both of us content to exist in the bubble of getting to know each other, learning the rhythms of our bond. But the kingdom needed a formal queen, and the ceremony couldn't be delayed forever. When? I asked. 2 weeks, Vera said, during the full moon. Every alpha in the territories will attend, along with representatives from the southern kingdoms and the coastal packs. It'll be the largest gathering in a century. And they'll all be watching to see if I'm worthy, I said quietly. They'll all be watching to see you claim what's already yours, Ronan corrected, moving to stand beside me. His hand found the small of my back, a casual touch that nonetheless sent warmth through me. You've already proven yourself, Emma. The coronation is just ceremony. Ceremony matters, Celine interjected gently. It shows the kingdom that you understand tradition, that you respect the old ways even as you bring new perspectives. I studied the maps spread before us, showing the vast territories Ronan controlled. Hundreds of packs, thousands of wolves, all of them about to accept me as their queen. The weight of it pressed down on my shoulders. What if I make mistakes? I asked. What if I'm not ready for this? Then you'll learn, Vera said bluntly. Just like every ruler before you. The moon goddess doesn't grant mate bonds to those who can't handle the responsibility. She saw something in you, girl. Trust her judgment even if you don't trust your own yet. Felix cleared his throat. If I may, Your Highness, you've already started making changes. The servants speak highly of you. You remember their names, ask about their families, treat them like people rather than furniture. That matters more than you realize. And you stood up to Donovan, Garrett added. Word has spread about the trials. Wolves across the territories are talking about the common-born queen who chose strength over safety. You're becoming a symbol. A symbol of what? I asked. Hope, Nathaniel said simply. That the old hierarchies aren't as fixed as we thought. That merit and heart matter as much as bloodline. Ronan's hand tightened on my back. They're right. You've already changed things just by existing. The coronation will make it official. I looked around at their faces, these powerful wolves who'd accepted me far more readily than I'd accepted myself. Then I nodded. Okay. 2 weeks. What do I need to do? The preparation was intense. Celine drilled me on protocol, how to address different ranks, the proper way to accept allegiance pledges, the traditional responses to ceremonial challenges. I spent hours with the palace historian, learning the lineage of Lycan queens, understanding the weight of the crown I'd wear. Vera taught me the politics, explaining the delicate balance of power between territories, the old feuds and new alliances I'd need to navigate. But the most important lessons came from Ronan himself. Late at night, after the councils and training sessions, we'd retreat to our shared chambers. I'd moved into the royal suite after the trials, and waking up beside him had become my favorite part of each day. He'd tell me stories about his long life, about the battles he'd fought and the mistakes he'd made, about the loneliness that had defined his existence before I'd stumbled into it. I was starting to believe I'd never find you, he admitted one night, lying beside me in the darkness. 200 years of searching, of meeting every eligible female in the kingdom, of hoping each time that maybe this would be the one, and nothing. No spark, no recognition, no bond. I traced the scars on his chest, each one a story he'd shared. Did you think the moon goddess had abandoned you? I thought I'd done something to deserve her rejection. I've made hard choices, Emma. I've ordered executions, destroyed entire packs that threatened the peace, made decisions that saved thousands but cost hundreds their lives. I thought perhaps I was too dark, too stained, for her to grant me something as pure as a mate bond. You're not dark, I said softly. You're just substantial, like an old forest. There are shadows, yes, but also life and protection and strength. He pulled me closer, burying his face in my hair. You see me differently than I see myself. Good. Someone needs to. He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest against my ear. I don't deserve you. You're stuck with me anyway. The night before the coronation, I couldn't sleep. I stood by the window in our chambers, watching the moon rise over the forest, my wolf restless beneath my skin. Tomorrow, I'd kneel before the assembled packs and accept the crown. Tomorrow I'd officially become queen of all Lycans. Tomorrow my entire life would change irrevocably. Second thoughts? Ronan's voice came from behind me. I turned to find him watching me from the bed, his silver eyes catching the moonlight. Third and fourth thoughts, actually. I keep thinking about the girl I was a month ago, scrubbing floors and trying to be invisible. How did I get here? You were always meant to be here, he said, standing and crossing to me. You just had to wake up first. We both did. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, and we stood together looking out at the kingdom that would soon be mine to help protect. I'm afraid I'll disappoint you, I admitted. That I'll fail at this. That I'm not Emma. He turned me to face him, his hands cupping my face with infinite gentleness. Listen to me. In the month since I found you, you've awakened a dormant wolf, survived trials designed to break false bonds, stood up to alphas twice your size, and started quietly revolutionizing how this palace operates. You've shown more courage and compassion than most wolves demonstrate in their entire lives. How could you possibly disappoint me? By not being what you need, you are exactly what I need. A partner who challenges me, who sees the world differently than I do, who reminds me that strength isn't just about claws and dominance. You make me better, Emma. You make me want to be better. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I blinked them back. I love you, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other, but He kissed me, cutting off my rambling, and I felt the bond between us flare bright and hot. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing. I loved you the moment I scented you in that hall. I loved you when you stood up for that foolish boy who threw a rock. I loved you when you chose our future over your fear, and I will love you for the rest of my very long life. We made love as the moon reached its apex, the bond singing between us, our wolves twining together in a dance as old as time itself. And when I finally drifted off to sleep in his arms, I wasn't afraid anymore. The coronation dawned clear and bright, the autumn air crisp with the promise of winter. I was dressed in white, not the traditional black of Lycan royalty, but white like my wolf's fur, like new beginnings, like the hope Nathaniel said I represented. The gown was simple, but elegant, embroidered with silver thread that matched our bond marks. My hair was unbound, falling in pale waves down my back, woven through with tiny white flowers. You look like moonlight made flesh, my mother said, tears streaming down her healthy, glowing face. She was there in the preparation chamber along with Celine, both of them fussing over last-minute details. Daniel waited outside with the other witnesses, so proud he looked ready to burst. I'm terrified, I confessed. Good, Celine said. Only fools face power without fear. The fact that you're scared means you understand the weight of what you're accepting. The ceremony was held in the grand hall where I'd first encountered Ronan. It felt fitting somehow, completing a circle. The hall was packed with wolves from every territory, the air thick with their combined power. I recognized some faces from the trials, saw others I'd only heard about in my lessons. Alpha Donovan was there too, standing at the back, his expression carefully neutral. Ronan had allowed him to keep his position after the trials, saying that showing mercy was more powerful than showing wrath. I wasn't sure I agreed, but I trusted his judgment. I walked down the central aisle alone. My choice, not tradition. I wanted everyone to see that I came to this crown on my own feet, by my own will, not as property being passed from father to husband. The assembled wolves watched in silence as I approached the dais where Ronan waited, already crowned, magnificent in black and silver. When I reached him, I knelt, not in submission, but in partnership. The crown was brought forward by the elder who'd presided over the trials, a delicate thing of silver and moonstone that caught the light like captured starlight. Emma Sterling, Ronan's voice rang out, formal and powerful. You have been tested by ancient law and found worthy. You have proven strength, loyalty, and courage. Do you accept the responsibility of this crown? Do you swear to protect the packs, to uphold justice, to rule with wisdom and compassion? I do, I said clearly, my voice carrying through the hall. Do you accept me as your mate, your partner, your equal in all things? I do. He placed the crown on my head, and the weight of it was both lighter and heavier than I'd imagined. Then, he took my hands and pulled me to my feet, and together we turned to face the assembled wolves. "I present to you," Ronan declared, "Queen Emma Blackthorn, mate to the Lycan king, protector of the realm, voice of the people." The hall erupted in howls. Hundreds of voices raised in acknowledgement, in acceptance, in celebration. I felt the bonds forming, invisible threads connecting me to every wolf present, tying me to the kingdom I'd sworn to protect. It was overwhelming and beautiful, and terrifying all at once. Ronan pulled me close and kissed me in front of everyone, claiming me publicly and without shame. When we broke apart, he whispered against my lips, "Welcome home, my queen." The feast that followed lasted until dawn. I met countless alphas and their mates, accepted their pledges, listened to their concerns and hopes. Vera got pleasantly drunk and told inappropriate stories about Ronan's youth that made him scowl and me laugh. Felix and the other guards formed a protective circle around me without being asked, their loyalty already shifting to include their new queen. Daniel danced with pack daughters who actually saw him as something more than a scholarship case. And my mother held court with other elder wolves, sharing wisdom and gossip in equal measure. But the moment I'd treasure most came near the end of the night. A small girl, maybe 8 years old, approached me shyly. Her clothes were worn, her hair messily braided, and she smelled like the lower quarters where the working families lived. "Your Majesty?" she whispered. I knelt down to her level, ignoring the shocked gasps from some of the more traditional wolves. "Hello. What's your name?" "Lily. I wanted to say thank you. My mama said you used to clean floors just like she does, and now you're queen. She said that means maybe I can be something important too, even though we're not from a big family." My throat tightened, and I took her small hands in mine. "You can be anything you want to be, Lily. Don't let anyone tell you differently, and your mama is already important. She's raising you, isn't she? That's the most important job in the world." Lily beamed and threw her arms around my neck in an impulsive hug. I held her tight, this child who represented everything I hoped to change about our world. And I felt Ronan's hand on my shoulder, his approval and love flowing through the bond. When the last guest finally departed and the servants began clearing the hall, Ronan and I retreated to our chambers. I was exhausted, my feet aching from hours of standing in ceremonial shoes, my head buzzing from too many conversations and too much wine. "You were perfect," Ronan said, helping me out of the elaborate gown. "Better than perfect. You made them love you." "Some of them, maybe," I replied, stepping out of the dress and into a soft robe. I saw the looks from the traditionalists. They still think I'm too common, too weak. Then we'll prove them wrong, together. He pulled me against him, and we stood there in comfortable silence, two souls that had found each other against impossible odds. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we rule. We build the kingdom we want to see. We protect the weak and challenge the strong. We make mistakes and learn from them. We live, Emma. We finally, truly live." I thought about the girl I'd been a month ago. Invisible, forgotten, believing she had no worth. I thought about my mother's stories of quiet rivers carving canyons, about survival being its own form of courage. And I realized she'd been preparing me for this all along, teaching me that strength came in many forms, that being overlooked meant you could see things others missed. "I love you," I said again, turning in his arms to face him. "I love you too," he replied. "My queen, my mate, my Emma." Outside our window, the moon set over the forest, and somewhere in the distance, wolves howled. Not in challenge or fear, but in celebration. The kingdom had a new queen, common-born and fierce-hearted, and the future stretched before us full of possibility. I was no longer invisible. I was no longer forgotten. I was exactly where I was meant to be, standing beside the wolf who'd seen me when no one else did, ready to face whatever came next. Together.